Welcome back. You're trying to get a real handle on how things work, right? To cut through the usual stuff and understand things deeply.
That's what we aim for here.
So today, we're tackling a really big question, I think. How can we even start to picture economic systems that, well, aren't just about profit?
Yeah, it's a fundamental one. We're diving into something called heterodox economics.
And specifically, this idea of heterodox modeling sounds a bit academic, maybe.
It can, but we'll break it down. We're using a recent academic paper to guide us. It explores how these alternative economic ideas can actually use modeling tools.
Not just to think about different economies, but maybe even to help create them.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack what heterodox modeling really means, where it comes from, and how it might help foster things like commenting.
Right. And well-tuned provisioning. We'll definitely need to explain those terms.
You will. They sound jargony now, but the concepts behind them are pretty intuitive, actually.
Okay, let's start with the background then. How did the mainstream view, the profit-focused one, get so dominant?
Well, it wasn't overnight. The paper points strongly to the post-World War II era, and specifically the Cold War.
The Sputnik crisis is mentioned. That seems unexpected, linking a satellite to economic theory.
Right. But it apparently triggered this huge push. The thinking was the U.S. needed better managers, better economists to compete effectively, win the Cold War.
So a national security imperative almost.
In a way, yes. And it led to massive investment pouring into universities, especially business schools. Ford Foundation, Carnegie Foundation,
Yeah.
they poured money in.
And that funding shaped what was researched, what was taught.
Profoundly. And it wasn't just theories. It was also about tools, new techniques.
Ah, okay. The paper mentions the military connection here. Quantitative methods developed during the war.
Exactly. Things like linear programming, systems analysis, even early computer simulations. The military had developed this toolkit for complex wartime logistics and strategy.
And after the war, these tools just migrated into the business world.
Pretty much, yeah. They were seen as powerful ways to manage large organizations, make things more efficient, more predictable. It really changed the idea of what professional management meant, much more quantitative.
Which brings us to those early business simulation games, like the top management decision simulation from the 50s.
And look who was involved.
Yeah.
The American Management Association, R&D, the Naval War College, IBM too.
Wow, that's quite the lineup. Military, industry, tech.
It really shows that deep entanglement.
Hmm.
And the paper makes this crucial point. These business games, they were derived directly from war games.
Okay, so the competitive mindset was there from the very beginning.
Absolutely. Built right in. The whole rationality they were teaching managers was centered on competition, prediction, winning, maximizing profit. It makes you think about the biases embedded in business education itself, doesn't it?
Definitely. It's like they were programming a specific worldview. And people saw the potential of computers in this, right? Martin Shubik called the computer laboratory equipment for economics.
Yeah, a powerful analogy like the microscope for biology. He saw it fundamentally changing the field.
Allowing economists to experiment in ways they never could before.
Right. And Cohen and Seart also highlighted how dynamic these computer simulations could be. You could model complex, evolving systems.
So the takeaway is mainstream economics didn't just rise on its own. It was heavily boosted by these modeling and simulation tools, which themselves had roots in, well, competition and military thinking.
That's a good summary of the paper's argument on that point.
Okay, so if that's the mainstream story, what's the alternative? This heterodox economics, what's the core idea?
Well, heterodox economics is really an umbrella term for approaches that challenge mainstream assumptions. Instead of focusing only on markets and prices, it looks at the bigger picture of provisioning.
Provisioning, meaning how we get the things we need, like fundamental.
Exactly. How societies organize themselves to sustain life. Production, distribution, consumption, the whole cycle. It looks at how economies are structured beyond just market exchange. Social factors, historical context, power dynamics, they all come into play.
And commenting fits in here. That sounds key to this perspective.
It is. Commenting refers to those activities based on shared resources, on solidarity. Think community gardens, neighborly help networks, open source software projects.
So people working together, managing resources collectively outside of purely market logic.
Precisely. It's about communities finding ways to produce and share what's needed, focusing on cooperation and well-being, not just individual gain. That idea of well-tuned provisioning links back to this ensuring needs are met effectively within the community or the system.
Like that community garden example, The food provisioning is tuned to the community's needs, not just supply and demand curves.
Right. It's a different logic.
So if mainstream economics leaned heavily on modeling, the paper argues heterodox economics needs to do the same, hence heterodox modeling.
That's the core argument. But it's not just about using models for heterodox theories. It's also about modeling in heterodox ways.
What does that mean, modeling in heterodox ways?
It means rethinking the modeling process itself, challenging the built-in assumptions. Mainstream models often implicitly favor competition, efficiency in a narrow sense, profit. Heterodox modeling aims to consciously counter those biases.
To build models that perhaps favor cooperation or sustainability, or this idea of well-tuned provisioning.
Exactly. To build tools that help us explore and even promote commoning, rather than just competitive market outcomes.
Interesting. Now, modeling itself has evolved, hasn't it? The paper talks about a shift to bottom-up approaches later on.
Oh, absolutely. The late 80s were a big turning point with object-oriented programming.
Like building with Lego bricks, he said.
Kind of, yeah. Instead of one giant program, you have these individual software objects that interact. It allowed for much more decentralized, modular ways to build models.
And that led to agent-based modeling, ABM.
That's right. ABM was a huge shift. Instead of modeling the economy or a system from the top down, looking at aggregates, you model the individual agents.
People, firms, maybe even ants or cells.
Could be anything, depending on the system. And you define their behaviors, their rules of interaction, and then you see what emerges from the bottom up.
Like flocking birds or traffic jams, complex patterns from simple individual rules.
Exactly. It's about emergence. This was very different from the older models that just looked at overall effects.
And tools like StarLogo helped make this possible, simulating thousands of agents interacting.
Yes, StarLogo from the MIT Media Lab was really important. It made ABM accessible. But they did something else fascinating too, these star people experiments.
Star people, tell me more.
Basically, they had people physically act out the roles of the agents in a StarLogo simulation, embodied role-playing.
So you weren't just watching dots on a screen, you were being a dot.
Sort of. The idea was to get a deeper, more intuitive feel for the system's dynamics. How did the interactions actually play out? It blurred the line between the simulation and, well, reality in a way.
That sounds like a powerful learning tool. So moving back to heterodox modeling, are there examples where this bottom-up, agent-based approach is used?
Definitely. Elinor Ostrom's work is a prime example highlighted in the paper.
Ostrom in the Commons, Nobel Prize winner.
Indeed. She initially used game theory, but her big contribution was showing how crucial communication and self-organization are for communities managing shared resources, forests, fisheries, irrigation systems.
The alternative to the tragedy of the commons where everyone overuses the resource.
Exactly. She studied real-world examples where communities successfully avoided that tragedy. Her analogy, the herd-and-herder game, showed how self-interest could deplete a pasture.
But her research showed it didn't have to be that way.
Right. If the herders could talk, agree on rules, monitor each other, they could cooperate and sustain the pasture. It showed the power of collective action and trust.
Moving beyond pure self-interest.
And interestingly, later in her career, Ostrom actually started using agent-based modeling herself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
To model these cooperative dynamics.
Yes, to explore the specific conditions under which cooperative rules get adopted and stick in these common pool resource situations. It allowed her to test different scenarios computationally.
Fascinating. And the paper also mentions Duncan K. Foley's LifeNet. That sounds much bigger in scope.
It is. LifeNet is a model for a socialist alternative economy. It envisions a network of peer production groups.
Pure production, like open source, but for everything.
Sort of. These groups produce goods and services and distribute them freely within the network. The key is you don't sell them as commodities outside the network.
And there's some kind of accounting system.
Yeah, a central system to track who contributes what and who takes what to maintain some balance.
And Foley thought a computer game could help people grasp this.
He did. An interactive computer game to make the LifeNet system feel more real, more understandable.
It's interesting to link Ostrom and Foley. Ostrom showing how cooperation works at the community level.
And Foley's sketching a vision for how those principles might scale up into a larger network. The paper draws that connection.
So if these ideas are out there, the next step is building better tools to explore them.
That's the pitch. The paper argues strongly for creating a large-scale open-source programming environment, specifically for agent-based heterodox modeling.
A toolkit for commenting, essentially.
You could put it that way. Something for education, for experimentation, for really trying to figure out how commenting could work in different contexts.
This makes me think about what modeling and gaming even mean. The paper suggests we need to rethink those concepts too.
Absolutely. The traditional idea is that a model is like a perfect little copy of reality. But Klaus Pius argues simulations don't give you certainty.
What do they give you then?
Spectrum possibilities, interpretations. Sometimes they reveal more complexity, not less. In science, that's useful. In business, they often try to reduce uncertainty with models, but that's not the only way to use them.
And gaming isn't just fun and games either. Algorithmic trading shows games can have huge real-world impacts.
Exactly. So the paper suggests maybe terms like rehearsing, exercising, practicing are better fits for what heterodox modeling could be about.
More active, more exploratory, less about predicting, more about learning by doing.
Yes. And Mary Flanagan's idea of activist gaming fits here too, using game-like structures for critique, for imagining alternatives.
And critically, who gets to do this modeling and gaming? It shouldn't just be experts, right?
That's a huge point. The paper mentions platforms like Roblox being misused and argues we need heterodox alternatives designed with participation in mind.
So bring more people into the process.
Definitely. And it points to existing approaches like companion modeling or COMMOD.
What's that?
It's a methodology where researchers work with stakeholders, farmers, community members, whoever's involved, to build models together. Sometimes they even include non-human elements. It's very participatory.
That sounds like a really good fit for exploring commenting principles.
It seems highly relevant, yes.
The paper also pushes for a broader view of provisioning itself, looking beyond just economics.
Right. Drawing insights from biology, neuroscience, ecology. How do living systems manage resources sustainably? How do ecosystems achieve balance? How does the brain allocate resources?
Can we learn from those systems?
Yeah.
About resilience, meeting needs efficiently but fairly.
That's the question it poses. It's about looking for deeper principles of how systems sustain themselves.
And this all seems to lead towards a practical vision involving Marcus Meindel's patterning system.
Yes, Meindl developed a way to describe like the grammar of bottom-up provisioning, how resources flow, how people organize in commons-based ways. It's inspired by things like UML in software engineering, but for social processes.
A way to map out commenting activities.
Kind of. And the idea is these descriptions could feed into a database, a network, connecting producers, consumers, resources, a bit like Foley's LifeNet, but emerging from these documented patterns.
So combine Meindel's descriptive language with Foley's network vision and build it all in that open source ABM environment.
That's the synthesis the paper points towards. A powerful combination.
And the ultimate goal of building such a tool.
The hope is it could educate a new kind of economic actor. The paper calls them commonist mediators, messengers, and managers.
People skilled in facilitating commenting.
Exactly. People who understand the principles and can help implement them. By making heterodox modeling tools widely available, the idea is to encourage broader adoption of commenting itself, a shift towards more equitable, sustainable economies.
Okay, let's try and pull this together. We started with how mainstream economics, focused on profit, got locked in, partly through its use of specific modeling tools with competitive roots.
Then we looked at the heterodox alternative, focused on social provisioning, sustaining life, and this key idea of commenting.
And how heterodox modeling aims to create tools that support that vision, often using bottom-up, agent-based approaches inspired by people like Ostrom.
Right. We saw examples like Ostrom's work on self-governance and Foley's larger LifeNet vision, and the potential of building open-source tools for exploring these ideas further.
We also touched on rethinking modeling itself, not as perfect prediction, but as practice, rehearsal, maybe even activism, and the need for participation.
Crucially, yes, moving beyond just experts.
So the big insight seems to be that if we want different kinds of economies, we don't just need new theories. We need new ways to model them, to experiment with them, to practice them.
Absolutely. It's about the tools and the practices just as much as the ideas. They shape each other.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. How might you, where you are, start to explore or even practice some of these alternative ways of organizing things? Could the principles of commenting apply in your neighborhood, your workplace, your online communities? Could participatory modeling help tackle a local challenge?
It's not just academic theory. It's about asking what we can actively build together, starting now. How can we rehearse a different future?